their offices on a going forward basis. But and we can't stop them from in bad faith interpreting this however they. I would rather have a pardon in my hand than Rand Paul yelling at me than Amanda.
You know what else we can't do? Fake declare a new amendment to the Constitution.
No, now, Jonathan. You go outside and you say, I declare the Equal Rights Amendment is the law of the land.
This happened on Friday. Biden declared that the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution was now the law of the land, even though basically no one else agrees. Love it. You want to unpack this one for us?
So, Equal Rights Amendment, the original draft had a deadline, I believe, of 1977. It was extended to 1982. It was passed by almost enough states to become a constitutional amendment. It was one away. Then in the years that followed, several states rescinded their ratification, and then Virginia became...
No takebacks on amendments.
No takebacks. And then Virginia became the 37th state to ratify the ERA, and there was a movement to say that Congress setting a deadline is not constitutional because the Constitution doesn't make any provision for deadlines for ratification of amendments, and therefore that part of the amendment doesn't matter, and the National Archivist, who is somehow, for whatever reason, very important in this process, should declare it part of the Constitution. They said no.
But she prints all the pocket constitutions, so.
Right? Yeah. Oh, and the big ones.
And the big one.
And the big ones.
She's got all of them. All
Yeah.
sizes.
Yeah, you get all the,
Used to. Play $1 Million Countdown from the Kentucky Lottery for a chance to win $1 million.
Biden could have ordered her to do it, and he did not.
Well, right. He could have ordered her to do it. It's not clear. Then it's not clear what happens after that, and it would then end up before the Supreme Court. The court has found that setting deadlines is a reasonable thing to do under the Constitution, that they have the right to do it. It does look to me like what I was comparing it to is like, okay, so Joe Biden is doing this kind of vaguely extra legal thing on his way out the door, and Donald Trump is doing this extra legal thing coming into the door, declaring that the children of undocumented immigrants are not citizens. And it's just, I feel like we're like, Joe Biden is the institution guy, and there's a bunch of critiques of Joe Biden from the left saying he defends the institution, but he should use his power, he should go further. Then he does something like this, and it's like, he does it, and the archivist says no, and then he's out of office, and it's fucking dead. And it just felt like a strange, I don't know, like, kind of statement of principle, or a fuck you out the door. It didn't lead to anything. It was purely ceremonial. It was just very strange.
The substantive case for trying to weigh in on this, I'd say, would be that the supporters of the view that the amendment has been ratified say that the president putting his weight behind it lends some credence to the legal case should it go before the courts, right? Now, fine, but in that case, maybe Joe Biden goes up and gives a statement and says, like, while I don't know if I can do this, I believe it is, and actually explains this. What made it sort of mocked, what led to it being mocked is, just like a graphic that he tweeted that is like, I declare the amendment is the law of the land.
I declare bankruptcy.
Once again, the way they went about it was just sort of like, what?
Yeah,
It was very typical. It's like enough to please the groups who've been pushing very hard for the White House to do this, but not enough to actually go all the way. Like, let's say he had ordered the archivist to do it. The archivist had printed a bunch of new constitutions with more amendments before you go out the door. One, those would be worth a lot of money when it's eventually struck down.
That'd be cool.
It was pure symbolism, right? And with no other communications plan around it. No communications plan around it.
Explanation for like why they did it, why they couldn't do it, what was going on, just nothing.
Right, all the alternative, by the way, he's right at the other door. He orders the National Archivist to do it. The archivist is like, no. And then where are we?
And again, isn't that just like beating up on Joe Biden as he goes out the door? That this was a weird thing to do. It's like, this is a good lesson for the future for Democrats. Don't do shit like that. Don't just declare stuff because, like, it's symbolism, performance of stuff. Like, it just doesn't matter. What matters is like explaining to people why you can do something, and then actually getting the power to do it.
Whether it's the pardons, whether it's TikTok, whether it's this, we have paid. So last time I'm going to say it for a while. We have paid so dearly for having an empty bully pulpit for a long time, and that is the sad end the Joe Biden presidency, despite a lot of good that he
Well,
You should, everyone should listen to Structures, and this will go deeper on this reservation.
speaking of someone who really knows how to Donald Trump, even though he gave the longest inaugural address in modern history, decided he was not done yet. Went to the overflow room and spoke to that crowd in Emancipation Hall. 33 minutes, and basically it was like it was the director's cut. Everything from the inaugural address, all the things he wanted to say,
DVD commentary.
exactly, all the things he wanted to say, but couldn't say in the speech. Let's listen.
And between JD and Melania and anybody else that had, please, sir, it's such a beautiful unifying speech. Please, sir, don't say these things. And he's going to talk about the J6 hostages, that you'll be happy because, you know, it's action, not words that count. And we're going to talk about the things that Joe did today with the pardons of people that were very, very guilty of very bad crimes. Why are we doing none of his pardon? What he said, terrible what he said. Why are we helping some of the people? Why are we helping Liz Cheney? I mean, Liz Cheney is a disaster. She's a crying lunatic and crying Adam Kinzinger. He's a super crier. I never saw the guy not cry. He's always crying. And I think this was a better speech than the one he made upstairs, okay? I think this was better, JD.
It's not wrong.
It certainly was a truer speech to who Trump is.
Yeah.
That's sort of the moment I think we all heard this was going on. We're like, this is the next 4 years. This is what we're in for.
Yeah.
It's a rally speech. One after the other.
Did you catch that, Dan? Did you catch the overflow speech?
I did, and it's exactly you described it right. It is the director's cut. It's just this. I mean, it's just like sometimes I can never stop looking at these things from perspective of a communications staffer. But you do this whole speech. This is your message. You have, I mean, it's poorly written, but someone did write it, and you have it out there, and you've decided these are the things you're going to do, and then he just calls Nancy Pelosi a criminal and talks about and calls Liz Cheney a crying psychopath minutes after your speech is over. It's like a truly wild choice.
I also, everyone should go watch this just to see the look on JD Vance's face at the top, where he starts talking about all the things he didn't want. He looks like so pained and kind of constipated. Speaker Johnson is like twitching and looking around and staring into the middle distance. It's
Well,
nice.
well, part of it also, like, this was supposed to be 10 minutes. And so, you know, it's a little bit like, they're like, okay, so Trump's gonna be a little toast, say thank you to all the people in the overflow who couldn't do this outside, and then we'll go do the parade and whatever other, and the heinous executive order ceremonies and all the other things. We've got big plans for the day. And so they're just standing behind him. They wouldn't have stood behind him if he was gonna speak for 30 minutes. So part of it is sort of like, can I shuffle to the fucking side here? I'm standing right behind him. It's supposed to be a greeting. He's doing a tight 15 on how the border wall was going to be made of cement, but the acid that goes through the cement, I didn't think it was going to be pretty. I thought it was ugly. There's Greg Abbott. There's this guy. There's that guy. And they're standing behind him.
And Melania and her big goofy fucking hat is just hiding her eyes and looking down and just was so pissed the whole time. And then Trump starts talking about how her feet hurt, how she wanted to go home, but he made her come here. It's so weird.
Yeah, but it was like, to Dan's point about the communications piece of it, he basically, you know, takes us all behind the scenes because he gets up there and he says, these are the parts I really wanted to say, but they told me I couldn't say today, that I should save it for tomorrow. But I'm not going to save it for tomorrow. I'm going to do it right here, right now. And
You know what? He was right. Doesn't matter.
well, that's his. He's like, he said,
He's
I,
right.
He said, I don't think it's going to affect the coverage because the coverage of my main speech is already out there and it's looking pretty good. But maybe I'll get in trouble.
Well, you know what? It will affect some of the coverage. We're going to talk about it. MSNBC's probably flipping out about it. New York Times will mention it, right? And then it won't fucking matter because most people that voted for him don't pay any attention to any of those media sources. And so it's like, they just pay attention to Donald Trump, what Donald Trump says. So if he wants to do his fucking tight 33 on his stump speech revised one last time, you know, that's what he's here for 4 years for.
Right, and I assume all the headlines, even the mainstream headlines that at least for a week that people will catch and see disperses are things like America's decline or over America's golden age. They are the headlines that Donald Trump would want it to be. And by the way, there's not a criticism of them. When a president gives an inaugural, the headline should be the headline line from the speech. That is what it should be. So of course he's free to fucking do this. And by the way, all of his biggest fans are gonna see this. They're all gonna see, don't worry, the real Trump is still there. We're gonna get exactly what we want from this guy.
just to end, Dan, you wrote a message box on Monday today, this morning. Is it Monday? We're recording this.
Today is Monday.
As you all know. About how to survive the Trump presidency. What are some highlights? What are some tips for everyone on how to survive the Trump presidency? And then we can ask Tommy and Lovett what they think too.
I'll do a few. I mean, for all of you, subscribe. But in all seriousness, I think there are just a few things I would, there are going to be, after today, 1,460 more days of the Trump presidency. And we got to get through all of them, right? And we got to try to get through them by let's get through them with our faculties in time. And so just a couple things that I've been thinking about is, one, yes, Trump won a really big victory. Like, he won, as he pointed out, in his inaugural address, he won all the swing states. The country did move to the right. He did win the popular vote. But he also only won the presidency by about 100,000 votes in 3 states. And that's just worth keeping in mind, not to tell ourselves some story about how we don't have to make huge changes in the Democratic Party, we absolutely do, but just that victory is much closer than it appears right at this moment. So just like keep that in mind. Second, I think this is a lesson we've all learned from the Trump years now, is we don't have to follow him down every rabbit hole, right? He wants our attention 24/7. He wants to just flood the zone with shit all the time. And our attention is our greatest resource. And we can decide when we give it to Trump. Not to give it to him all the time. We can just pick between the things that actually matter, where he's making a real impact, and the things that's just a bunch of noise to distract us. And so I think it's a very important thing. It's something I'm going to try to do with the newsletter, and something we can do with this podcast, is try to help people separate the signal from the noise. I think the most important thing is we're all angry, we are anxious, we are worried, and the best thing to do, and that's always been true ever since Trump was first elected, is to channel that into action. And people should go to Vote Save America to figure out ways to do that. Because I want to keep people like a North Star for this, which is right now the Republicans have one of the narrowest House majorities in history. You have a bunch of Republicans who are existing in very, very purple districts. The voting patterns in the Trump era suggest we have a phenomenal chance to take the House back. And if we take the House back, Donald Trump will never pass another law that does not have Hakeem Jeffries okay. We will have the ability to investigate Donald Trump, we have the ability to hold hearings, to issue subpoenas, and we can do that. And that isn't just, we have to get through these 2 years focused and working on taking the House back. And if we do that, Trump will still be president, he can still do really bad things, but we will have so much more power and ability to limit what he does and limit the damage he does and expose him for who he is.
All right, I like that. Anyone else?
Watch what he does, not what he says, and focus on those midterms.
He said that in the speech. He said, well, actions matter, words more than words.
Here we go.
I think that was right.
Yeah, he's a strong silent type, this one. Yeah, I've just 2 thoughts. One is, things change less than you think in a year and more than you think in 5 years. And I think today, to me, was like a reminder of that. We wonder, like, how did we get to a place where corruption doesn't matter? Like, how did we get to a place where Donald Trump can abuse the office in this way? Well, it took time. It took a slow degradation of basic values, of the Republican Party being slowly and steadily corrupted, but it did change. It changed a lot. But it did it in a matter of just a few years. And we shouldn't be so cynical or apathetic or resigned to believe that it can't change just as much in the other direction in another couple of years. We have to slowly work towards that in all the ways we can. And that's a very big goal, and then that's a hard goal and sort of to think about. And then when you get anxious or bored or frustrated or mad about thinking about that big problem, you can focus on the very concrete, just winning things.
Yeah. I think, it's taken me 43 years to do this, but I don't doom about the future as much anymore not because there's nothing to doom about, but because nothing we can do. Worrying about it is not going to change it. So really trying to take the Trump presidency one day at a time and focusing on like what we can control and what we can't, and also recognizing that, to Dan's point, he won by 100,000 plus votes in all the swing states, and we should also recognize though like why he won. And it seems like not the Trump fans, but the additional people that got him over the hill, that got him over, they got him close to 50% and won in the swing states. They were pissed about the cost of living, and they didn't think that the Democratic Party gave enough of a shit about that. And right now, price of eggs, $4.15. Price of eggs, mortgage rate is 7%. gas is $3 a gallon. So we're just going to check back in on those because let's just take Donald Trump at his word. We've tried resistance politics. Let's try normal politics. Normal politics is he made a bunch of promises, big promises that he was going to do. He's going to fix the country. We're not going to be in decline. Everything's going to be great. It's going to be affordable. Prices are going to fall. You're going to be doing great. Okay, if that happens, good for Donald Trump. But if it doesn't happen, we should point it out. We should point it out along the way when he breaks his promises or when he declines to fulfill them.
Yeah, there's a moment in the speech where he says that the country is unifying behind my agenda. It is not. That is that is wish casting. That is hopeful thinking. But the policies that are deeply unpopular a week ago remain deeply unpopular today. No, the country doesn't want giant tax cuts for the rich. No, it doesn't want a president who's focused on bathroom policies and ridiculous right-wing grievances over their basic daily concerns.
And we'll be here with you guys the whole time. We're not going anywhere. So stick with us. You can, and our friends at Vote Save America are going to be. You can sign up at Vote Save America to figure out how to get involved. We're giving everyone a break for a little bit, but you know what? There's going to be 2025 elections in Virginia and New Jersey. Then there's going to be the midterms before you know it. So we're going to be it's going to be busy again. And also, you know, we'll be here on Pod Save America and all of our other pods, and you can sign up at Friends of the Pod to be a subscriber. And we have a great community, and everyone is good to each other and shares their ideas. And we want to hear from you guys as well because the Democratic Party has a lot of work to do. We are at rock bottom.
Let's hope. Let's hope. As Dan
Well, at least
said,
for the party, maybe not the country, but for the party, we're pretty much at rock bottom. So it's going to take everyone to figure out how the hell to get us out of this.
And as Dan said in his message box, gotta support Friends Media. We gotta have some alternative to this.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Dan and I will be back with a new episode on Friday, and we will see you then. Bye, everyone.
No.
We are joined by two esteemed guests, Janine Yunus, Aaron Mate, who you all know and love, man of the hour, living legend, and Megan is also there. And so we are here in the Sleet at the Spotify pop-up studio. Lots of music blasting around, but now we're going to delve into the real issues of the day. And Aaron, you and I were at this event last night. They called it a peace ball. What were some of your observations from that event? Like Megan and I were talking just before you got here. It seems like a pale imitation of like some resistance fervor trying to be replicated now, and like no one really cares anymore. You had all these kind of cringe-worthy, kind of left-wing kind of platitudes and things. I mean, I don't necessarily begrudge people for holding it or wanting to attend something, and maybe it wasn't overtly pro-Trump like every other event that's being held in Washington, D.C. But what were some of your observations? Then we do have some clips that I want to share with both of you and get your reaction to, but just your broad takes on the state of the resistance. Also, by the way, the New York Times, we talked about earlier today, they were reporting that the woman who actually knitted the prototype for the original Pussy Hat in 2017 for the Women's March, even she is so dispirited that she just not even bothering to protest this time around. So I guess what does it tell you about the resistance or lack thereof?
Taking us back to 2017 and the first day of Trump's administration, the resistance embodied by the Women's March and the parallel routing at the airports against the Muslim. What explains how all that is dissipated? Well, and again, I'm very influenced and biased by the issues I've focused on.
Mm-hmm.
So one of them, of course, is Russia did it.
Really?
I hadn't heard. That's good. Which I think killed everything. How could it not? When you channel resistance to Trump and all the legitimate ways to oppose him into a dumb conspiracy theory, and you save your figures become people like MSNBC pundits screaming about Russia every night, and Robert Mueller, John Brennan, and enrolling people in further neocon orthodoxy, and just reducing resistance to watching cable news and hoping that Robert Mueller is going to issue the long-awaited indictments for the Russia conspiracy. So I think that killed it right there. And then now you have, fast forwarding to today, although in that time that sort of cemented this like faith in institutions. That was like the mantra constantly. The institutions are going to hold Trump to account. And by that they meant courts, they meant special prosecutors after Robert Mueller and Jack Smith, hoping for all these various legal cases against Trump, the classified documents that now nobody cares about, the hush money case.
They resurrected the Espionage Act to charge Trump, and nobody cares.
Yeah. And the various scams, the lie about Hunter Biden's laptop being from Russia, the Russian bounties in Afghanistan. So a combination of outright scams and conspiracy theories, most comply to Russia fantasies, and then this belief in lawfare, this devout belief in lawfare, and of course that's going to show for now. And so now Trump is coming back in, so no wonder people are feeling deflated. And then you have the Gaza genocide, as I call it. I know not everyone describes it that way, but and that certainly split the Democratic base. A lot of people who supported the Democrats and were able to oversee some of their other missteps, including on Russiagate, were very just let down by Biden's policies and the failures of the Democrats to hold him to account, and the failure of Kamala Harris to chart a different course. So those are the main factors that I see right now, sort of the deflation, among many, in the deflation of the resistance. And last night at this peace ball, I saw a lot of very commendable statements, people outraged by Gaza and feeling betrayed by that. But even there, and even in that movement, you have areas where I just have my disagreements that I think made a real movement impossible. For example, you had these progressive lawmakers last night who have taken a lot of heat for their brave stances on Gaza. Rashida Tlaib, Cori Bush, Jim McGovern was there as well. But what do they do when it comes to voting for the Ukraine proxy war? Enriching the very military-industrial complex that last night they were talking about fighting. They all voted yes every single time in lockstep. And I blame Russiagate in part for that. Because
All right, let me just stop you there because I have to play this clip.
Okay. Yeah.
And excuse me, Janine, for passing over my question. We'll get to it, I promise, on that same issue. But
We want everyone to react.
but this is like one of the most unbelievable interviews I think I've ever conducted. Okay, so Cori Bush is out of Congress now as of January 3rd. She lost her Democratic primary in Missouri to Wesley Bell, who was funded by AIPAC and pro-Israel lobbying groups, and she was pilloried for calling for a ceasefire very early.
APAC spent over $8 million.
Yeah,
Just
so
so people.
her and Jamal Bowman were the two main Democratic incumbents who were ousted. And what was most cynical about those primary campaigns is that the pro-Israel funders would air ads in the districts of the Congress people that often had nothing at all to do with Israel. They were saying that she wasn't loyal enough to supporting President Biden's infrastructure plan and stuff, when obviously they didn't give a shit about infrastructure. But anyway, so you got to hear this, because I asked her about this very issue that you raised about the handful of Democrats in Congress who have been critical of the Israel policy having this incredible blind spot for Ukraine policy. So I've never heard.
Being progressives who are supposed to stand for funding social programs and not funding wars. That's like
Yeah.
the bedrock of being progressive.
Okay.
But yet we couldn't find one to vote once against the Ukraine crisis.
Literally not one. Democrats were 100% united in voting for those appropriations packages around Ukraine. Okay, so let's listen to this, and we're going to splice it in editing so people can hear it. But I'm just going to play it from my computer for now.
You mentioned in your speech earlier at this event that we're at the Peace Ball, you want to basically advocating for a general movement of peace. I'm wondering how you relate that to the issue of Ukraine, because it seems like the Democrats in Congress were almost virtually united, actually 100% united in funding Ukraine, which, whether you like it or not, that does involve sending a giant amount of munitions and weapons and armaments into a hugely destructive war where you have hundreds of thousands of casualties, Russians and Ukrainians piling up in the battlefield. And the only criticism was coming from a section of Republicans. So is there any contradiction, do you think, in terms of you calling for peace or Democrats calling for peace and not being willing to at all reevaluate the policy on Ukraine, which has really been extremely catastrophic. It's some of the most brutal warfare since World War I, like 100 years ago. And Democrats, from my perspective, just to be honest with you, have been very missing in action in kind of critically evaluating that policy and just going along with it, whatever the Biden-Harris administration wanted in terms of weapons. Really, what about diplomacy? What about some other option rather than just dumping endless weapons into Ukraine? Is that fair, do you think?
I think the other part of that, though, is the threat of U.S. troops by the masses moving to the ground was a very real thing. At least that's how it was presented. It had been presented to us in Congress, and for me,
Presented by who?
presented by the administration that that would be a very real thing. So did we want to keep U.S. troops from having to go to Ukraine? So that was the thing that people were weighing.
So the White House presented, just to clarify, the Biden White House presented the issue to you as if you don't supply the weapons that they say are required, that could involve, that might mean that U.S. troops would have to go into the combat?
If we don't, not saying that if we don't supply the weapons, it was if you all don't support these bills, then that could be the outcome. And so for many, and I can't speak for everyone, but the question, when I look at my own district, and I think about those who often are the ones who end up with the least amount of help, the least amount of services, often don't have what they need when they return back. I wanted to support my community in that. So that's what that was about, making sure that we weren't sending the black and brown bodies to go and do this bidding, and then using the money and the resources to go and do that. I can't speak for everyone, but I know that was what some people were thinking. And so I can't speak for everyone. I didn't have those conversations, but that was just a very real thing. So. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I forgot to put my microphone in my face. Your thinking at the time, when these appropriation bills came forward in terms of arms for Ukraine, was that by approving arms for Ukraine, you were lessening the likelihood that, as you put it, black and brown soldiers or people that had joined the military would end up getting deployed to Ukraine. So that's how the administration framed it. So I assume, through no fault of your own, you're not somebody who spent a whole lot of time probably focused on the issue of Ukraine. Over the course of your career, you have other interests mostly, right? And so they presented it to you, or your interpretation was that by providing those munitions, you were basically saving or no. Okay. So,
No, it wasn't providing munitions. It was supporting these bills to hold off Russia, supporting these bills. Was there funding
for munitions.
What the funding was for? This was a way to stop us from sending U.S. troops, who, for me, what I was already dealing with in my district were mostly black and brown and marginalized folks that we were trying to help. It was to stop that from being the next occurrence. That's what that was.
Those bills provided munitions.
I've given you a lot of time, and so, and for you to turn this into a Ukraine thing was not, so I'm trying to answer your question.
I'm trying to be respectful, honestly.
Yeah.
I just thought that Ukraine was relevant given that we're at the peace ball, that's another conflict going on.
Former House member.
No, absolutely. What I'm saying is that you keep, like, asking question after question after question. I only answered 2 questions with everybody else. I gave you like 6.
No, that's fine, yeah.
So,
All right, well, I appreciate it the way I didn't mean to be rude at all.
Being rude. You took the opportunity to just.
I did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone would do. I get. I'm just saying. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well.
I want to speak for other people about, because I haven't had those conversations. So yeah.
All right. Well, former Congressman Corey Bush of Missouri. All right. Thank you.
Zero accounting software helped put me on the right path. It's easy to find your numbers all in one place and get a clearer financial picture. So find the power in your numbers and open the right doors with Zero.
That's a better vlog. Grab every lamp in the house for DIY, like there's treating yourself. And then there's whatever that is.
If you've ever eaten and I agree with that.
All right. So, Aaron, that might be the favorite of you. Done. Her argument, I never heard this before, have you? That voting for Ukraine funding was presented to her, or at least she interpreted the case that was being made by the Biden administration as, by voting for these appropriations bills, which you seem not even to be totally clear included funding for munitions. Because remember, people like Cory Bush are never even asked about Ukraine.
Exactly.
They're asked about Israel a fair amount because they have a position that is going against the grain somewhat. But on Ukraine, like, it's just exempt from any scrutiny. Whereas Republicans are asked about it all the time to like probe fissures within the Republican coalition. But she's saying that she voted for those Ukraine funding bills to protect black and brown bodies in St. Louis.
First of all, I want to say I have a lot of admiration for Cory Bush. I do. She's a first-term Congress member. She gets targeted by AIPAC. She's already under a lot of pressure. Coming from a working-class background, being a black woman, being a progressive. There's all these forces that lie against her. So her position on Ukraine, I don't even fault her for it, but I do blame the progressive leadership in Congress, who basically forced someone like her into a position where if they were to take a different stance to vote against all this money for the Ukraine proxy war, they'd be even more vulnerable and targeted. And I understand why someone in that position would have a hard time doing that. But the answers she's giving to you just make no sense. First of all, if it's true what she's saying, that the administration said that, if we don't get this money for the Ukraine proxy war, then we might see a situation where our armed forces have to fight. Then basically, that shows the Biden administration, if it's true the Biden administration said that, then the Biden administration would have committed a pretty big lie, because the Biden administration always said, we're not going to send troops to Ukraine, no matter what. So if they were using that as sort of like blackmail behind the scenes, and it's a big if, by the way, I don't want to take what she said there as like on faith, as like that was like regardless, if that's what they did, it's incredibly cynical because they weren't going to send troops to fight in Ukraine. That was never an option. The whole point of the Ukraine proxy war, the whole reason to prolong it was to use Ukraine to bleed Russia. That's what Jake Sullivan acknowledged. That's what Lloyd Austin acknowledged. Everybody knows now that was so this threat that we meant to send troops one day, and then if the Biden administration did threaten and Cori Bush buys that, it's just ridiculous. Because what you should do in that situation is call their bluff and say, I'm sorry, like you're not going to blackmail American taxpayers by threatening to send our own troops into this disastrous war that nobody wants and that could have been avoided.
But Aaron, I think it's probably fair to say that she just does not have a foundation of knowledge from which she could have drawn to call the bluff.
Yeah.
So she's just taking the cues from the people who are briefing her. It's not like when she was like an activist in Ferguson or whatever, she was spending a lot of time thinking about Ukraine.
100%. And that's why I thought people like Pramila Jayapal and every other, and Bernie Sanders, every other progressive leader in Congress who's been there for a lot longer than Cori Bush, who knew exactly what was up, who knew there wasn't a threat of the U.S. going off the war, but still then allowed, basically told everyone to go along with funding it, spending well over $100 billion to prolong a proxy war that could have been avoided before Russia invaded, and certainly afterwards when there were peace talks. And amazingly, this is forgotten, but there was a 24-hour period where people like Cori Bush, after voting for all these multi-billion-dollar bills, signed on to a letter calling for diplomacy. But after a little freak out online from neoconservatives,
This was the Progressive Caucus.
yes, yeah,
They repudiated.
they withdrew it. They apologized for daring to call for diplomacy and using the overwhelming U.S. leverage. And then Cori Bush says that so to protect black and brown bodies and to be able to care for them.
That to me is the most cynical part. I don't know if she's being consciously cynical, but to invoke this like nomenclature of black and brown bodies to try to provide some bizarre extraneous justification for supporting Ukraine war funding. I mean, that's almost a parody of like left-wing lingo being deployed in whatever circumstance is seen as necessary at the moment.
Especially when all that money that was spent on this horrible war could have actually served marginalized communities. That's the whole point. That's what I thought being a progressive is about, not supporting foreign conflicts, at least those that are unnecessary like this one, and destructive, and instead spending on social media. Had progressives taken up that mantle, they could have provided an alternative to Republicans who opposed the Ukraine proxy war money, and I think benefited from that electorally because there was a significant percentage of the population that also didn't want to see this money spent fueling conflict abroad. So it's sad for me to hear someone like Cori Bush, who I think is a genuine advocate of peace, of social justice, all these noble things, being intimidated into going along with it, and then coming up with the really questionable rationale that we discussed.
Janine, do you have a thought on that? Because Cori Bush really was very much out for ceasefire early on. I think it was either 2023 in Israel. Applied to her and other Democrats around the Israel issue. And yet, there's another major conflict that's been roiling, the world and the U.S. political system for even longer than the post-October 7th conflict in the Middle East, and she just doesn't have a cogent thing to say about it at all, despite having voted for every appropriations bill funding U.S. provisions in Ukraine. So, what do you make of that dynamic? Sometimes I feel like I'm the only journalist who ever asked these people about this issue, really.
Yes.
And it's bizarre. Yeah.
I mean, I think she's kind of emblematic of a lot of Democrats who, have what I would call the right position on Israel, Gaza, because in a way that's more obvious. You're talking about people who've been under occupation and siege in Gaza for many years, decades, and are, now being bombed, genocide committed against them. So it's kind of easier to be on the right side of that one. But I think a lot of progressives don't quite understand what the correct stance is, and not that there's only one correct stance, but the real issues. And like I use my mother as an example all the time because she's very smart, but she sort of reads the New York Times and takes everything they say at face value. She doesn't look behind that, and she thinks we should definitely be in Ukraine, and that's sort of the agenda that's being pushed by the progressive left and left-wing media at this point. And I think a lot of people don't really look behind that, as obviously Cori Bush did.
And this is where I fault, by the way, progressive media, where people like Cori Bush go, and which is their base of support.
Well, give us some examples, like Democracy Now.
like my former home Democracy Now, which, again, just, they represent the type of progressive media that after the Russian invasion forgot all the reporting they did for, years, and I was a part of when I used to work there, on the role of NATO and Ukraine and the coup of 2014 and the Minsk Accords, all this context that is so important to understanding that, like, Russia's invasion, whatever you think of it, you don't have to justify it to just recognize all the factors in which there was a provocation, and this could have been resolved peacefully. And certainly, the answer was not necessarily a fight with Ukraine, but billions of dollars over strike the peace talks that began between Ukraine and Russia. And even shows like Saturday, prices like Ford versus Vermont would never challenge them on, hey, like, why are you voting to authorize tens of billions of dollars?
Well, I think part of what happened was Russia also became a bad guy during the Trump administration, and a lot of progressives sort of bought into that. Trump and Russia were one, and so I think that sort of fit into the narrative and convinced a lot of progressives that being in Ukraine was the right thing.
Russia, you can criminalize diplomacy with Russia, and it made
Ukraine.
Sorry, Russia gave criminalized diplomacy.
And Ukraine,
Deidre, what did you say?
It's like an order, a presidential order.
Yes,
He
to roll out.
enacted an order prohibiting any diplomacy
Yes.
with.
But the ideological and narrative foundations
Yes.
for that was Russiagate, where, all of a sudden, in the liberal movement, and many progressive minds too, Trump and Russia became synonymous, so everything bad about Trump was then the fault of Russia, and therefore dealing with Russia was therefore treason, and that helps set the stage for Ukraine.
Yeah, and they also created this kind of superstructural narrative about how Russia was responsible for any emergence of like dangerous right-wing populism
Yes.
anywhere in the
Yes.
world. Hillary Clinton famously gave a speech in August of 2016
Yeah.
where she kind of introduced this theory, and the exact quote, to the best of my recollection, was she called Putin the grand godfather of like global extremism. I think she might have misspoken, but she ended up saying grand godfather of global right-wing extremism, and that carried forth ever since, where Putin was responsible for Le Pen in France, and whoever, and there might be some kind of convergence of interests here and there, but it was always really overstated in terms of the direct, proximate, causal relationship that you would have with any of these incredibly disparate movements anywhere in the world. Like, remember Putin was blamed for the trucker protests against Canada?
Yes.
So it goes on and on and on. But as far as the incoming Trump administration, though, I wanted to play just a brief clip, and Ginny, I promise you will get to the Israel thing soon. But I want to play a brief clip. Here's Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary nominee.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw this. He had his confirmation hearing this past week, and he's being questioned by Senator Mark Warner, and the issue of Ukraine comes up. So I just want to have this be like a window into what policy continuity or divergence might be on the offing as the Trump administration comes in.
I believe that the sanctions regime, especially, well, first of all, I would say in my adult life that the tragedy going on in Ukraine is one of the greatest tragedies of my adult life, and ending that as soon as possible, and any role the Treasury can play in that, if confirmed, I would like to do. As we discussed, I believe that the sanctions were not fulsome enough. I believe that I believe that the previous administration was worried about raising U.S. energy prices during an election season, and I am perplexed to see that National Security Advisor Sullivan, on his way out the door, is raising the sanctions level on Russian oil companies, and indeed, the oil prices in the U.S. are up about 9% this month. So what was good for that administration is being foisted on us, but having gone from, I think, low-level sanctions to mid-level, that if any officials in the Russian Federation are watching this confirmation hearing, they should know that if I'm confirmed, And if President Trump requests, and as part of his strategy to end the Ukraine war, that I will be 100% on board for taking sanctions up, especially on the Russian oil majors, to levels that would bring the Russian Federation to the table.
And I won't take 30 seconds, let me just get 30 seconds. Thank you for that, because I think it's important that we don't take these tools out of the toolkit. We can litigate what the past administration did and when they did it, but increasing pressure on Putin to bring about a resolution. I very much appreciate your willingness, and I hope you will be an advocate for keeping those sanctions on and actually advancing them even further. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Warner.
Okay, so Aaron, that's the incoming Treasury Secretary criticizing the Biden administration for not applying severe enough sanctions to Russia, and saying that the incoming Trump administration, they'll be less reluctant to actually hit them where it hurts by ramping up sanctions on the Russian state oil companies. Actually, this has been something that's been proposed in Trump circles or Trump adjacent circles for a while now as to how this policy approach would differ. And something that really bugged me over the course of this 2024 campaign was that when Trump would talk about the issue of Ukraine, Russia, he would usually say something like, the war never would have happened, and he's been in power.
I'm not about to fall asleep, TJ.
Okay, tell that to the look in your eyes.
I will.
So we'll have to wait and see what happens by noon. But there was very little specifics sussed out. And this is the incoming Treasury Secretary, this has been echoed by others, saying that they want to actually increase the bellicosity with Russia, and somehow that's going to give the U.S. enough leverage to like force Putin to capitulate or to submit to U.S. demands. So I don't know. Do you feel like this stuff wasn't fully fleshed out enough during the campaign, or what is your reaction?
Well, that narrative contradiction that you identified, where everyone assumed Trump was going to be condemning Russia, soft on Russia, however you want to put it, and then there was zero policy evidence for it. In fact, all the evidence went in the other direction, because in Trump's first term, he did impose massive sanctions on Russia. He did carry out a really important nuclear arms treaty, which no one talks about, but puts the planet at peril, the INF Treaty, which Trump destroyed, but everybody ignored it because it undermined the prevailing narrative that he secretly was doing Russia's bidding. And now,
And by the way, with the tearing up of the INF Treaty, Russia developed new intermediate range ballistic missiles that it just showcased for the first time like 2 months ago or so, when it launched that really extravagant attack. It's kind of a demonstrative attack on a Ukraine, I think, arms production facility.
yes, and restoring that treaty was at the center of the proposal Russia put out in late 2021 as part of its offer to avoid invading. It's take it or leave it offer. You know, one of the goals was to restore the provisions of the INF Treaty. So Trump played a major role in fueling the conflict to Russia's invasion. But he has said still recently some things that I do think are a departure from everybody else. He's talked about how there does have to be a peace deal that recognizes Russian. He talked about he's empathetic with Russia's hostility towards NATO and he said that if he were president, he would authorize what Biden recently did.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Poor
U.S. sad person.
Recently, that if he follows through on them would be a stark departure. But as you point out, people around him don't have that position, including his Treasury Secretary. And his record in office was to be a hawk. Now, the one thing though, another argument for thinking why maybe he will go in a different direction now towards peace is that the tech oligarchs around him, they do want friendly relations with Russia. Elon Musk, others, they've been critics of this proxy war for a while. And just, whereas in the first term Trump wanted to get in with like the neocons of DC, that's why he appointed all of them like John Bolton. Now he's got people like Elon Musk in his ear, and he does to be like so.
But he's got Mike Waltz and Marco Rubio.
Jamie, go ahead. If you compare the relative power there, who has more power, Elon Musk or Mike Waltz?
Let me say something on this because this gets into the Gaza dispute.
Oh yeah, we can make the transition.
I do think Trump 2.0 is going to be very different from Trump 1.0, and I say this as someone who cried when Hillary Clinton lost the election and had a bit of
Okay, well I never humiliated myself.
I actually, well, I was, but at first he's said a lot of things, and he said a lot of things during his campaign trouble me, and he appointed a lot of people, especially when it comes to Israel Palestine, to trouble me. But he has immediately gotten out and brokered a ceasefire deal that Biden didn't bother to in 15 months. And I think he may be playing 4D chess to an extent. I mean, I don't know, maybe he's not that smart, but maybe he is, and he's a businessman. I don't think he likes war. I've recently watched some clips of him from the Iraq War era where he expressed real distress about the veterans coming home amputated, about the Iraqi people. Now he's not beholden to any of the interests that he initially was, in order to get reelected. So I think we're going to see something very different, and I think he may be trying to please some of his donors by putting in place some of these people who are hawks, but I think we're going to see something really different. I mean, he might disappoint me. Maybe we'll be sitting here in 2 months and I'll eat my words, but the fact that the first thing he did before he even took office was broker this ceasefire deal, which is very good for the Palestinians who are dancing with joy in the streets. I bought my dad a MAGA hat as a joke because he's so happy with Trump.
Okay.
In the Marco Rubio confirmation hearings, he said we want to end the dying in Ukraine, kind of echoing Trump's words, apparently. He said that Ukraine would have to make concessions, so I think even Marco Rubio, maybe there could be a change there. Maybe he could be less financial.
They're all beholden to the president, right?
Yeah.
They're his, so they can't, Trump has to pay whatever they do.
I guess, my point about Rubio is that if you compare the incoming second Trump administration to the first Trump administration, the Secretary of State is much more ideologically neocon, if you want to use that term, in the second administration than the first. Rex Tillerson was kind of like an apolitical.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
ExxonMobil CEO.
Who wanted to talk to Russia.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas Marco Rubio, and I kind of have advocated for jettisoning the term neocons. I think it obscures more than it reveals at this point.
Yes.
It's just like anybody with foreign policy views who I don't like is like, therefore a neocon. So whatever terminology you want to use, Marco Rubio has a much more robust record of favoring really hardcore interventionist policy measures than the first incoming Secretary of State did. Now, Pompeo is much more in accord with Rubio than he was with Tillerson, but that's why there seems to be more continuity. And Trump made a lot of these kind of gestures toward disliking war, and part of the reason why I think he won in 2016 was because he was calling out like the trillions of dollars that had been spent in the Middle East.
Yes.
And then a lot of those expenditures were never really reinvested in the United States.
No.
As he advocated, he actually escalated in Afghanistan, which people don't know or maybe never remember or never knew in the first place. A record number of bombs dropped in Afghanistan in the year 2018 and 2019, and we're told that Trump is like somehow opposed to the military-industrial complexes of the military-industrial complex was really unhappy with having to produce the munitions to drop at record rates in Afghanistan. So I grant there are some rhetorical gestures that he makes. But on the issue of Gaza, I've been told that I need to repent and apologize. I guess you have a formal apology for just like covering the campaign when Trump is basically attached at the hip with Miriam Allison. Trump is Miriam Allison simply floating around DC somewhere. She was at the Peter Thiel party last night with Don Jr. and
First major step is the first long-term goal is to become a senior political advisor. I mean, senior policy advisor. Because I want so I want to be a senior policy advisor. Then there's a precedent for running for Senate from that position and winning.
Senior policy advisor to Senate.
To Senate.
So basically, you're taking like the shortest possible path. Because this sounds like a really short path.
It's not long. 7 steps, 6 steps, something like that.
Oh, okay.
But
so what were you gonna say?
Senior policy advisor to.
Because you don't just
Senate. Yeah, I know that's not the first step, but it's the first long-term goal.
Yeah.
That's like.
Mm-hmm. It's the first one that's hard to get.
It's not. Yes, pretty much.
Yeah.
So senior policy advisor. To
a successful campaign.
To congressmen. So.
Right. Yeah.
Then after congressman, you can run for president eventually.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to get to senior policy advisor, before that, I could start at.
Junior policy advisor.
No, I could start at policy research assistant. and then you climb your way up to senior policy advisor. And to get to policy research assistant, because I don't have a college degree, I need to get experience in some kind of political job to deal with the fact that I don't have a degree and I don't plan on getting one.
Mm-hmm.
And Alex recommended working on a campaign because they tend to care about enthusiasm more
than anything.
Credentials.
Yeah.
So
and your beliefs too.
right. So I've been hashing out what I've been working on. That didn't take me long, but just figuring out that part. But then the question is, what job would I get first at a campaign?
Yeah.
Because I have to figure out what I need to learn in order to qualify for the job.
Well, you mentioned it was a 6-step process.
Yeah.
And so senior advisor to senator to president, that's 3 steps. So that would imply there's 3 steps before that. If you're choosing from the positions that exist, you need to be realistic.
No.
That's the kind of job you would do for me, because I understand that shit. But you could try to go and explain it to someone else and get them to do it, and they might. I'm just saying, that's like a very un-Deidre-like thing to do.
Yeah, but it is a very presidential-like thing to do.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing I would love for you to do.
It would look very good on my resume. So I had a discussion with Alex. Part of the discussion with Alex was I had to decide whether or not it was even wise, like a good decision for me to try to create this role or to just do one that's like already established. And I decided from that it was better for me to do this role, even though it's going to be much more difficult than just being
because you know that it will be more effective, and also, if you have enough influence over the politician that you can get them to do a new thing that they have never even heard of before, and they're just trusting you that it'll work because they believe in the logic of it. That means that's a relationship worth having. So.
That's right. So I've been hashing out how I would go about doing that, how I would go about convincing a potential political campaign employer to give me this job that I am creating, and
oh well, it's easy. I mean, it's not easy, but conceptually, it's not hard to think of how you would do it.
Yes, that's not the point. I just needed a detailed step-by-step plan written down for my fucking notebook.
Yeah.
Now that you're done insulting me, can I continue?
Yes, I would like to know what else there is.
The first step in the path to creating that job is to do a research project to prove that the job that I want to create is one worth creating. I have to do a research project where the objective is to compare the potential of engaging voters on X on political topics to commonly used methods in political campaigns one by one. And for each comparison, the objective will be to compare the efficacy of the method to the efficacy and the actual efficacy and the potential efficacy of engaging with direct engagement on X. So
yeah.
I suspect that it will be much more effective at not only like growing at engaging voters to begin with, but growing bases in a way that's and garnering higher quality voter participation and loyalty. And on top of that, it should be much less expensive than a lot of the ways that they're using to try to do the same thing. Like this is responding to someone's tweet is practically free. Compared to
knocking doors, it's
and
insane.
Digital ads and yada 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 blase blase blase. It's way less expensive.
Yeah.
It's even less expensive than like making a tweet outright. because it's just responding to a conversation that's already being had.
Yeah.
So anyway, so what I've been doing is planning out this research project, because that's the first step in doing it, is having a plan.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wonder what the research project is going to cost, and I wonder how realistic. I'm gonna want to know what the plan is like for the research project to see how realistic I think the results will be.
It really shouldn't cost anything because I'm mostly just gathering data on the efficacy of the current degree of engagement of politicians on X. Direct engagement of politicians on X, and like.
I see. You already have your side-by-side comparisons and your sample sizes that other people created. They don't have to be perfectly scientifically pure. You can just go out and cherry pick reasonably pure ones from the world.
Yeah, and then compare it to the data that is already had on the efficacy of like door-to-door canvassing and stuff like that. That stuff should all be all out there in public info. And there is some degree. There's some degree of some stuff that I don't know exactly what I'm going to be looking at, but for like.
Once you immerse yourself hard enough in the data, it will become clear to you what's what.
Yeah, but no, I'm talking about like I have to look at the potential of more engagement of. I have to look at the potential of it too, of engaging directly with voters, because there's probably not a lot of data on it happening actually. At least not in the way that I'm imagining.
On it happening
right now. At least not in the way that I am imagining.
What do you mean when you say we need to look into the potential of it?
Because there's not a lot. Because I don't think that pretty much any politician or political campaign is engaging with voters on X the way that I think that the way that I'm imagining that they could be in the future. There is not any actual data on that happening right now that I can use. Because of that, I will have to look at its potential rather than what is actually happening.
How?
That I have not hammered out yet. But I think one way to do it is to look at this happening in another industry. For example, when musicians directly engage with their audiences, how does that help them compared to musicians who do not? Shit like that.
Political commentators would be the nearest example.
Sure, whatever. I like I said, I don't have it hammered out yet.
Yeah, but that's a good idea. Mrs. President.
But the problem is, I don't know how much political commentators are doing what I'm talking about either. I'm specifically talking about people who reply to people on X. As much as they have time for.
That's not the right way.
Or
to
they
think.
pay
That
someone
isn't-
to
that
do it
is-
for them.
That isn't the right way to think about it. It's not just X. It's wherever they have a significant
I know it's
social
not.
following.
I know it's not just X.
Hardcore engagement with their following.
I know it's not just X, Christopher. It's just that I have to take each platform one by one to do a proper study. I'm starting with X, and I can compare other platforms later on.
Jimmy Dore, Sitch and Adam, Destiny. These are people who have hardcore engagement with their audience.
Okay, but I want to start with X because it's the specific kind of platform that it right now it already has the reputation for talking about politics.
Oh, Elon did what you said on Twitter before he even bought it.
He's a great example of it, sure, but and I will look into that, but his will be kind of hard because I'll have to compare how his engagement on X about politics affected like how much people buy Teslas, which is not a very great comparison because people are going to buy Teslas pretty much no matter what because they're literally just the nicest car on the market. So I need something that's not just I need someone who isn't already just objectively the best to have a clearer picture of how this engagement can boost someone's popularity.
Well, I think if you looked at the Elon Musk data, it would tell a pretty clear story about how his hyper engagement with his audience boosted his overall power over time. But I also agree with you that it's not good enough to have only him as an example.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, he's a decent example, but he's not a perfect example for what I'm...
I just think anyone who hyper engaged with their audience and then got really big in part or in whole because of that reason is a great example of what you're talking about.
Okay, but he mostly just became more of a household name as a result of him being on X. I don't think he got a whole lot richer.
These things are indirectly but very meaningfully and causally related. You become a household name. It's like step one, become famous. Step 2, become a household name. Step 3, become super wealthy.
He was already super wealthy before he was a household name, is the thing. He was the richest man in the world before he was a household name.
I don't understand the timeline well enough to agree or disagree, but...
I didn't know shit about him until he started being on... Not about anything like that. I didn't really even know who he was until after he got involved into politics. But before that, he was still at least one of the richest men in the world. He was the owner of SpaceX and Tesla back then, too.
Yeah, I forget how he first came into the political consciousness.
At first, he was
The rockets, it was really with SpaceX. but I don't know about actual politics.
All I'm saying is, he was already extremely wealthy before he got this boost in being known.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and it's not hard to grow your wealth when you're wealthy, so it's not, I agree. It's not a superb example just for the simple reason that he was already hyper wealthy. But if you looked at his whole life, it might be the case that he wasn't that wealthy at one point in time, and he did use a hyper engagement with an audience to massively help his growth over time. That could easily have happened in the life of Elon Musk.
Sure.
I don't think you should be restricting yourself to examples of people who've done this on X because...
I'm not. I'm just prioritizing it because it's the place where people talk about politics the most online right now.
That's to exclude YouTube from a sentence like that is just fucking scandalous.
People do not use the comments section. I'm not talking about where content creators post videos. That is what YouTube is. I am talking about where regular people talk to other regular people about politics.
Oh.
The town hall.
That might be something like Discord. It's dispersed throughout a bunch of different, like Mark Zuckerberg uses WhatsApp or whatever the fuck. But everyone has their own.
X is the biggest one. Is the one with the biggest reputation to go and talk about politics right now.
Okay. I'm just saying all these various...
I'm not excluding them. I'm just not prioritizing them over X.
Okay. Okay.
So, what's your problem?
I guess there isn't one as long as you find abundant examples of what you're looking for in the one place that you're looking for the examples.
It's not the one place I'm looking for the examples, Christopher.
Okay.
It's just the one I'm doing first. I have to take each social media app and compare it to each each method that they use to grow their bases.
Oh, well, see, that's my problem. I don't think that is really... No, maybe I'm wrong. But it just strikes me as a legitimate question whether you should measure each site individually or just the online approach collectively.
I will do each site individually, then at the end, combine the data that I found into one large report.
Makes sense, but there would have to be a time limit for the study itself because the various different platforms would have to be measured against one another within a meaningfully close frame of time for it to be scientifically valid.
Sure, but as long as it's within a couple of months, I'm pretty sure it'll be fine.
Sure. I don't know the details.
I already have a tentative end date of 2 months from now.
Okay.
For the whole project.
Sure. I don't know the details, but that doesn't sound crazy to me. Literally nothing.
Get him here.
Other than he randomly hit me in the fucking face right after I finished putting on lip gloss. Other than that, literally nothing.
He hates not getting the chapstick.
Ha ha ha.
It's one of his favorite things to fuck with.
Oh my good lord. What a fuck face. Glanfy little Glanfy, cause you're my Glanfy Planfy.
Did he get the chapstick?
What?
Was he wanting the chapstick?
And the controllers and the recorder and fuck up everything, I assume. See what?
The last milestone is to finalize and submit the report. Submit the report to who?
The campaigns that you want to work with. The campaigns for election and the campaigns for re-election. Punky little punky, you're my unky junkie. You're my empty little pimpy with a stimpy and a glimpy of the flimpy loo. Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah, Dada. Teacher, what's going on?
I have a form that I'm filling out that I created. That is my project planning form. So, trying to get it filled out.
How long is it?
I don't know if I looked at I looked at the end. It has 7 or so sections.
So it's not short.
No.
Yeah. It would be so much nicer without pulling out Dad's hair, don't you think?
Yeah. Yes, Daddy.
We feel so much better when we don't pull people's hair out, Dad. Yes, Daddy.
Interesting.